Favorite podcast?
Guys, come here.
Let's go! Favorite podcast?
Favorite podcast? The Guys Got It podcast.
A rock, personally, having connection to source.
Support system is the most important part. If I'm in a state of survival, I'm not going to be thinking about the same things that I would be thinking if I was in a state of comfort.
You're talking about some deep shit, boy.
This podcast with Cedric Michaud was incredible. Cedric is a business partner. We help people empower themselves with holistic financial planning to get them to the best place they can possibly be in life. Me and Cedric went on a road trip down from Canada in British Columbia all the way to Las Vegas, Nevada. We went through 7 different states together. In this particular one, we're at Zion Park in, I believe it's starts with an M, Montana. Boom! The topic that we chose for this podcast, The Rock.
Who are you people?
And we used it to symbolize things in our life that are fundamentally necessary for everything else to build upon. Mindset that's involved in entrepreneurship and how to become the best version of yourself overall. Enjoy the podcast. Welcome back to the Geist Gunnerd podcast. This is episode 4 with Cedric Michaud. What's up, brother?
This is
Where are we at? Where are we at right now?
we are in the entrance park of Zion.
We're at the entrance park of Zion, which, simply put, is we're at some massive rocks. We're surrounded by really massive rocks and ravines, and it's really sick. We hadn't even been in a desert area before when we were coming down for a road trip that we're on right now. We're from Canada in the Rocky Mountain area, and we headed down to Las Vegas to do a USA road trip. And so on the way down, we went through this area called Mount Shasta in what area of the States was that?
It's California.
California?
Northern California.
And then we went to Vegas, and now we're coming back over this way. And where are we in right now?
So we're just like before Cedar City, kind of like, towards Salt Lake City, where we were kind of heading.
Yeah.
And, we decided to stop at this park in particular because of how incredible these this erosion that's happened here, all these layers, like there's so much information, of like, thousands of years. Like, I don't know. I'm not well versed on that side of things, but
Yeah.
man, like it's incredible what we're going to see. We haven't even gone through the whole thing. You'll probably be here for days, I guess, looking at all this stuff, right?
They are super ancient, and this type of environment has been utilized over the long time and recognized for being how profound it is. That's why it's a national park. And there's so much history involved in what's happened here and just the nature of like having a sacred land or an area which is a rock for a particular civilization, right?
If you go back into time, I wonder how they calculated that, like how they got to actually make it what it is, that's insane.
Yeah, it's really crazy. I mean, that makes me think about ancient civilizations, like all these crazy structures or structures that are particularly built to true north or to the Sirius constellation, which I didn't even know existed before I found out that they built it towards the Sirius constellation or the Orion constellation or this and that, or like they've dissected the stars in one way or the other to determine certain things. I feel like there's a lot of ancient history that was really connected to this stuff, and most people aren't, for one reason, just because it's out of where people are living.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's definitely interesting how people used to be a lot more connected to how this stuff worked and why it was important, and how to, facilitate a place to live, a dynamic that helps them feel connected to everything and feel grounded for their lives so they can help tune in to who they want to become, who they feel they need to become and be embodied throughout their life. Mm-hmm. And you can definitely do that in lots of different environments, but coming to these types of places really makes you go back inside, you know? Even the echo is just like, it's only you out here kind of a vibe, right?
It's very cool to think of like we're traveling and making meaning in our travel, you know, we're traveling with purpose essentially, right? Like we're teaching ourselves the landscape of the land, or like the way of the land as well, right? Like I think, you know, you're talking about ancient civilizations. I think like just like how this all came to be, like they probably had a route from like, you know, this exchange of whatever they were making in that area and they wanted it to get to here, you know, and they needed it for survival or to grow the country that it is today. You know, the United States is so many states doing different things, but like they've all got their, you know, niches or, you know, attractions. So
Yeah.
it's cool to be able to like, you know, we were already going to Vegas and like that alone is a 20-hour drive. So like there's so much that you can get into. And I think when you look at it, go, oh, you do have to do so much research to be able to pull off a trip like that. It's like, well, yeah, there's research involved, but I think it's like, you don't need to know everything. You just need to, you know, get out there and go see it. Right.
Yeah.
Like you'll never experience anything unless you just try it out. Right.
Totally. Sometimes there's a certain amount of research that you have to do to not just be, you know, ignorant to the fact that there's risks, but also you need to just kind of prepare as much as you can and then figure out how it actually works in its real application. And talking about that stuff also made me think about how I've never been one to like look out the window when I travel and stuff. I also don't really love driving. I've just like never been a part of that world. It's never been a passion of mine. All my friends happenstancely have loved cars and they love doing all that stuff. So I just kind of always a tag along, you know, I got the drinks and stuff, but, it's a really interesting difference going on this type of a trip to me versus going from A to B, going from where I live to visit my distant relatives or something and not looking out the window at all, not caring about where we are or anything like that versus going on a trip where the actual event is the driving.
We've been sitting here and all I can think of is like this big rock and like, you know, that word itself, what it means in a conversation or when you're talking about someone that's in your life as a rock, you know, or you've been that person for somebody else, you know, and what that means. And I think that opens so many different things that you can express, you know, because I mean, that's just it. Like when you look at something that's beautiful, you know, like what is it that is beautiful? Is it, you know, like just what you're seeing or like your appreciation for it? You know, like, do you look at the subject you're looking, is it something that you know about? You know, like if I look at a rock, I mean, I know it looks cool, you know, and it's got its properties and so on, right? Different rock, different things that you can do with it, but, or different material, but I don't know much about it. So like, it's going to probably be on the surface and then I'll move on. Right. Like I could try to force myself, but there won't be any passion involved with that. Right. And it's so funny how we're all different and we have different passions for things and specifically with nature. Right. It's almost like we're destined with these different connections to things. Like I hate water, for example, but I've learned to get better with water per se. You know, like I know that if we don't have this water, we aren't going to be in a desert very safe.
Yeah. I hope you're not as scared of that water as you are as jumping into it.
Yeah. Well, I
That'd
mean,
be a
considering
problem.
I am water as well, I'm scared of myself, I guess. Oh, man. When you think about the rock of your own life, you know, of your family, you know, typically it's either your parents are the rock, one parent or the other. But you grow up with maybe what we call a role model or that love for your wanting to be, you know, your parents. And you know, as you progress down this road, there could be different consequences of development that happen over time. And like that self-development tentacle is very complex because it could be stunted in some way, or it could be enhanced in another, but it doesn't mean that it creates a full, or an advantage or a disadvantage until you put it towards action, right? Until you're being faced, but like with the consequences of what it brings. And what I mean by that is like, hey, well, if you've absent of one parent, you know, that it was that they just weren't there for you or, you know, it wasn't that connection, right? So all of these different combinations we all have experienced, but I don't feel like we've all had, you know, create a lot of instruction on how to deal with that, right? So like, I mean, what's your take on that? Like, as far as your structure with your parents growing up, you know, like, where do you, was the rock on do you have a rock for yourself with like your friends and friendship, like at this age? Or do you still have a close connection with your parents and they're still the rock for you? You know, like how does that look in your life?
Learning information for me is a rock. Having more and more accumulated information, like having more data, a part of my brain network, is my rock in a sense. That's what makes me be able to be confident a lot, is being able to revert back to all the work I already put in and study. I can fall asleep to while I'm studying things. Like I'm very passionate about learning how fundamental things work, to the extent that my brain is like, this is better than sleep, bro. Like, let's go, let's run it up. And so that's a big rock for me. I felt like, relating to parenting and whatnot, when I was younger, I had great parents, but they were like more of my friends in a certain way, or at least my dad was more of my friend. And then I felt like I wasn't being educated or taught how certain things that I was supposed to be doing, for instance, health, actually mattered. It was just more of a dogmatic, like, do it kind of thing. And like, you know, you should be doing this. And I'm like, well, why? And they're like, well, because you should do it. And then there's just a lot of those things. And I'm like, well, I guess none of this matters because, you know, whatever. And so that's how, when I was younger, I was obese. Like I got like that because I just didn't understand health. And I was like, well, if something tastes better, then I should do that. And my dad didn't like that stuff. So I'm like, well, why would I eat that? Like nobody else likes it. Just my mom wanted me to eat it. But then I found out, oh, you feel better when you eat healthy. It's like, why did nobody tell me that? Exactly. Why did nobody tell me that? You look better when you eat healthy. Yeah. Everything else in your entire life is better. And so for me, a rock personally would be, one component is for sure my mind. One component is for sure my body, being able to be confident that I'm fit and healthy, relating back to that. And then another part of that would be the spirit, mind, body, spirit, having connection to source, having been able to experience more places like this, or even just going for walks wherever I'm at as I progressed through my life, giving myself moments where I can go back to this piece of solidarity, go back to the void, go back to all of consciousness, go back to God, go back to the universe. That provides me safety. That provides me love at an easy to access place. And so all of those things are the rock to me in regards to where I could access right here and right now, which could amplify any scenario, no matter what's going on. So that's my personal rock. Mm-hmm. Then I think there's also other rocks in regards to my parents. Mm-hmm. Huge for me. I'm 21. I still live with my parents, and I have a really awesome studio setup where I'm able to build my business, and I'm also able to build content and pursue those types of developments, which I think have the potential to be something really big that I could have only done in the way I'm doing it if I had the environment, the loving and protective and, you know, nurturing environment, you know, that I was able to build because of that, right? I've had a lot of opportunity to come to the understanding of what the best technology on the market is, and have a place to save up, be in a circumstance to save up to get those things, in addition to just studying stuff to be able to then have conversations about it. So I would have had none of that without my parents. And so they're a big rock to me because they're what is enabling me to have this creative mind. Like a lot of people, like even you, when we travel, we talk about how like, I'm always just up in the air. Like I don't really think about like, you know, whatever could happen, logical, mathematically speaking. I don't know if you have any exact examples of that, of what's happened, but
it's just experience, obviously. It's nothing that you could know before it happened, you know.
But it's just like a person. It's just like a personality thing. Like I'm a lot more of like a in my head ideation, visionary sort of person. Yeah. Whereas there's other people to a certain degree, like yourself, to a certain degree, because you're also very much philosophical and in your head similar to me.
That's right.
But have that grounded side where you're like, dude, like we can't drive up that mountain, we fall off a cliff. Or like, but we could figure it out. Yeah, and you're like, well, could we? I don't know. And I'm like, well, okay. But like, but then there's other parts of it where it is incorporated. But anyway, I couldn't have that mindset of no fear going up to people in public and interviewing them, you know, reaching out to people without any second thoughts about there being any possibility of them be feeling negative, like energy coming from me or something. Cause I just know there's positive intentions and I don't have as much of these experiences which produce like, you know, baggage of the soul or anything, where I just feel like I can go talk to people. And so that's been able to produce something which I feel like I'm specifically able to benefit. So I think that's been a rock for me, a really important rock, is having my parents there to subliminally enable me to be my childlike self and capitalize on that with the study and with the development, all the work that I've done, right? Yeah. So I would say that my two main rocks would be my mind, body, spirit rocks, my spiritual self-developmental components. Yeah. And then it would be my parents. Of course, my other, friends like yourself and like many of our other mutual friends, etc., have been instrumental. But I think those two fundamentally are the most important, but there's many other components of that. What's your perspective on that?
Well, I just wanted to say I love that how you laid that out, because I think there's such to be said about an appreciation for, both the good and the bad. There are things that our parents did that were incredible that helped us towards where we are today, but there are, of course, things that they didn't know, that they weren't taught either, right? Mm-hmm. It's just a cycle if you don't address it.
Yeah, and if you never reflect on that, or you never heal yourself from that sucks. Like I once went in the bathtub and I meditated, and I went through this whole visualization process because I just read Russell Brand's book on detoxing and healing yourself and all of this stuff, forgiveness. And his protocol was visualize, and it's not his protocol, but what he was discussing is visualizing people in your lives who you have any sort of resentment towards, or any sort of, confrontation that was never resolved, and going through a visualization process of deeply putting yourself in their shoes and really feeling those emotions. So for me, I knew that in order to build, my North Star in life is to build the biggest self-development community in the world. So I'm like, if that's my North Star, then I better get on a good place with my parents. They're going to need to support me, because that's just a detrimental component. Elvis wouldn't have been able to build Elvis's career if he didn't have his family and friends, right?
Absolutely. The support system is the most important part.
One person versus even two people is the number 1 to 10, because there's just so much more that two brains can do, and then particularly 3 or more, right? But I just knew I had to get them on track, and that was one of the things I did, is I did this deep visualization where I put myself in the shoes of my parents, who both moved out of their houses by 14. And that's also around when they met. They've been young, very young, right? My dad moved to more schools than I've ever heard of anybody, ever. He had 7 stepmoms or something, and he was just constantly moving and moving and moving and moving and moving and moving and moving. And all of his childhood was very much so, getting into fights. And that's young childhood. That's in school, 10 to 14, or lower than that, and they're all like smoking weed or doing this or doing that, or, the gang vibes of that area in Saskatchewan and Canada. And he had to really grow up quick. And he never had the opportunity that I'm having now to be able to really explore what I'm passionate about, or what I want to do, or how I want to make an impact. And it's he is trying to do everything he can for me. And same thing with my mom. She was very much so trying to do everything possible to be able to help me. But she also only had some degree of some support throughout her life. But they moved provinces, and then they moved another province. They started a family. We have no family around our areas. And so it's almost crazy to expect someone who's really been pushing themselves and being on their own to be able to support you in every single way that you would, prophesize, or you'd visualize at the best case scenario. So seeing that viewpoint, putting myself in their shoes and really feeling those emotions, which I feel is something that anybody can do for their parents, or for anybody that they're trying to really develop a good connection with. They know they have to, but they're just not sure how to heal themselves from that yet. As I put myself in their situation, same thing with my brother. And for anything that I felt hurt by, I just put myself in their mindset. And I was like, oh, well, they did this they had this particular way of teaching me how things work, because they didn't have enough time to think about the other alternative ways. They just needed to have this done because they were thinking about really important stuff. If you just put yourself in their shoes and understand it for the entirety of how they relate to you and how much they love you and why they were doing it, then you can feel so much love, and they'll be able to feel that, and you'll be able to work with them so much better because you can really understand them. So that's how you can really heal a rock on the side of the family, the parents. And obviously parents would also be replaced with any authority figure in your life if that wasn't your scenario. I would be curious to hear if you had any thoughts on the other half, which is that mind, body, spirit side that I talked about. Do you feel like there's any ways that you amplify that part of yourself, or how do you deal with the mind, body, spirit side, trying to help your own mindset as you go through things in life? Like how do you relate to that when there's, bad habits that you're trying to replace or fix, or how do you get back to your rock where you're like, okay, this is where I want to be, my morals, my values, my, biggest passions. How do you try to orient your mind to your best selves?
That's a great question. And I can't help thinking about the sun right now, and like how the sun is excruciatingly hot, or, if you don't have water, you're going to dehydrate. And like this whole area, even go out this way, there is no greenery. There's nothing growing in certain directions. But then you have this that has all this life, and then you go, well, wait a minute, like this is all interconnected, and it's all helping the system. Like your family's helping, your brother's helping you, you're helping your brother. And like when you realize that, like at first glance, maybe something looks like it's toxic or it's harmful, but if you get to know it and utilize everything, like you said, putting yourself in the shoes or understanding a little bit more than just your point of view, I think that leads you down a path where you're starting to understand a little bit more how you're affected by it, or how it's connected to the rock that we're talking about, right? To the emotional maybe response that is going to come out of the experience. So like, for example, if I'm in a state of survival, I'm not going to be thinking about the same things that I would be thinking if I was in a state of comfort. So I think there's two different, and you brought it up in your example with your parents, right? Like, if you think about it, there's probably so many kids out there that feel misunderstood, like, their parents don't spend enough time with them, or they don't understand what they want, or that they have all these things set out for them that they don't want to do, or they have no interest doing. And I mean, I'm sure there's so many people that relate, but also, do we talk about it? Have we normalized just being able to express that it's part of the growth? It's part of leading to that path that will lead you to finding your rock. Like, you have no problem answering that right away, and you can tell because you've had that instilled in your life. You've taken the time to find your rocks. And I think that's part of like what's important to factor in when you make sure of having a good system, or like being there for your family or your friends. Is like, you got to start with you, right? Like, if you can self-assess and go, hey, you know what? I'm being a good support, or I'm not, or if something happens in between and it's serving you or it's not, it's about how you react to it and how you deal with it than it happening, because the information that you get from what happened is an experience. That experience leads you to understanding further and further and further. Like, I understand this a little bit more when I start understanding that the sun it can be harmful, but without the sun, none of this is going to grow to create shade, so that I can go and live for a little bit longer, or that I can grow some leaves or food, or it all interconnects. You can't go one without the other. You can't really have a successful life without having parents, and some people have the worst parents in the world, and so be it, right? But pivot that, take that and turn it into an opportunity to become the best parent out there in the future, or, lean and maybe ask a friend, about some experiences that maybe they're experiencing, like that have parents, like, I don't know. It's easier said than done, but I think the topic for me is something that I've started to make more of a focus, because I've had those experiences in my life where I definitely realized that I needed, to find my own role models that would lead me to who I am today. And consistently, I keep refreshing that. Recently, I've made a founder of a company that I've now planted my flag in, because of the values that they display about how they were able to pivot, and continue to display and normalize growth by understanding the source and how it plays a part in the all connected base of everything. Right? Fancy of an explanation just to say that, look, well, a rock is still a rock, but you don't know it's a rock unless you've gone through an experience that makes you realize that you need to hold on to that. Just like your parents, and when you appreciate them, you utilize it in the system to better yourself, as opposed to complaining and maybe going down the wrong path of delusion or delay in growth. Right? Because like that's one thing that I've admired at your age, that you see that of taking the time to see it from somebody else's angle and shoes. I think that's something that every generation lacks thereof, even from generation to generation, about each other. Because you think about the baby boomer generation and that all of this transfer of like that it is ownership and even like the wealth is transferring in the next how many years, and like that's going to shift a lot of different mentalities. And maybe some of the families did transfer those great values because the right role models and the right way to have like a legacy has been passed down. But I think back then there was more value behind that. There was more honor to your name and to your family because they had proper rock systems in place because they were in a state of survival. I think now we're not in a state of survival as much. We were just in Vegas and you can go and be at a pool all day. You got a room key and you're in, like.
Hey, it's pretty hot out there. It's pretty hot by the pool.
Yeah. But that's just it. There's definitely a lot of growth that can happen, at a young age when you're just exposed to the right, conversations that can happen that, spark that mentality. Like, hey, I have lately not gotten along with my dad or my mom or my brother or sister. Like, how do I turn that into something that can help us both? And if not, how do I just treat any future conversation, in order to make sure that it's nurturing, for a positive consequence as opposed to a negative one.
Totally. Yeah. Those are great points. I think that was really cool that you talked about those types of things and how different areas connect with one another and how you need to really appreciate those things for being there and utilizing that appropriately. And something that I think would tie in to what we were talking about before with those, the mind, body, spirit, or like the rocks of being able to develop yourself would be, there's so many different techniques and tools and stuff that I love to use, that I love exploring and appreciating and sharing with people, because it's not stuff that's traditionally taught. And those things are traditionally taught to help people just generally grow or explore their mindsets or whatever. It's like you kind of have to go to a particular place where people are doing it out of whatever angle they're doing it in, usually in like a business sense, that are then going to share you. It's not something that's going to be necessary, or it's not going to be something that's going to be pushed. Those fundamental things that will most benefit you is things that you'll usually have to really try to find and understand what you're passionate about, what resonates with you to do those things. But before we do that, I just want to take a quick break. Okay? Sound good? Sweet. Oh, yeah. Well, drank here.
Well, maybe you can fill me up. Ooh, the sun setting down actually looks pretty cool. Golden hour, they say. So speaking of filling my cup.
Great segue.
It's crazy how when you take a moment and you just kind of think about all the crazy like landscape we've seen and all the things that are going on in different areas, and like we got the opportunity to kind of just run through it essentially, like just kind of, but we had moments in all of these different landscapes. It's almost like I feel like our soul also like kind of imprints itself in like these new geolocations, and I feel like it kind of upgrades as it learns. Because we're talking about like you learn, you have things that become your rock in order to maybe face harder times that maybe come from these journeys that you're going on. But on these journeys, once you like really take a mindful moment and realize the growth that it's bringing to you, and like this next level consciousness that as a human being, you're just like, oh, like, the world is so beautiful. There's just so many beautiful things to see, people to meet, it's just
Totally.
It's incredible, right?
Totally. Yeah. And
it fills my cup.
Yeah. And I definitely want to relate to what I was talking about before the break there, which was those different tools which you can utilize to develop yourself that people don't talk about often, but in a different way than what I meant. But in a certain aspect of that same sense, travel is also one of those things that you can technically use for your self-development, right? Like there's travel where you're just going to do something that's indulgent, that doesn't move you forward in any particular way. Like if you were to just strictly go to a particular place to travel, like when I view travel in that sense, I hate travel. I don't like travel. I don't want to do it. I don't care. I don't want to spend my mind, energy, attention. I don't care if I'm just traveling somewhere just for the sake of traveling, for me particularly. But for something like, for instance, this Vegas trip, we had innate in the trip so many different things of opportunities that were inevitably going to happen for us to grow as individuals. And so travel can be used as a tool as well. Like, we're a part of a company where we're able to go to these conventions like we did in Vegas. There's over 30,000 people who are attending the convention, and we're all learning these self-development related principles and teachings. We're all learning how to be better people fundamentally, learning how to be better leaders, learning how to do everything in life as school or some sort of institutional thing should have done, but never did for most people find. And that was only one component of a couple of the days of the trip. We've been out here for over, a week, right? And that was like 3 days total, or maybe 2 days of the main actual part of it, right? And so that was one part of our trip, is this self-development conference. But then there's all these other things that we did. I interviewed somebody. We did a different podcast with a really profound, in my opinion, spiritual leader who is, one of the people of Mount Shasta that leads all of those types of events, the spiritual community events, where they talk about these taboo things related to Mount Shasta and humanity, connected to Mount Shasta, such as extraterrestrials or technology or sound healing or geometry, sacred geometry or crystals or whatever, and looking into some of that data, looking into what his perspectives and beliefs and stories, case studies are, that was an area of growth for us fundamentally.
Yeah.
And we really made that happen. Same thing with the ET actual little place that you could stop at to follow that up with, right? The day after we did that podcast, we went to the,
Area 51 Alien Center?
Area 51 Alien Center, which was incredibly underwhelming. Very underwhelming. And I thought that was crazy. There's just green aliens everywhere after we just sat with this spiritual leader who showed us all the data that is out there, such as the FBI documents or, whatever it would be. And nobody ever mentions in all of that part of the world, all of the, the documents or whatever those people in that community believe and other people purport to see. Nobody ever says green alien. I don't think anyone's ever said green alien in any of the things when you look into it.
That one.
No, I don't like that one because it's fundamentally bull. It's bull. And almost everything in that gas station, it's basically just a gas station, is a green alien or a yellow alien. And everybody in that whole community is usually like they're either humanoid, gray, or blue. That's like the biggest consensus. And then there's some other things and whatever. But I just think that even just that aspect of it is fascinating because you see that whole experience in a different light when you really, use travel, like in our instance, for self-development. If I didn't reach out and get into contact with Robert through literally just posting on social media that I'm looking to do podcasts with spiritual leaders, is essentially what ended up getting me connected with Robert, we wouldn't have had that experience the same way, right? Like, I've done a lot of research. I've been fascinated by this topic for a while, but could you give a little bit of a background on what your knowledge base has been about with this stuff, or where your mind's been about it before seeing and experiencing Robert talk about these things, the spiritual leader relative to those topics, and the ET gas station, and how that just developed for you, or, for someone who's looking for truth and understanding how reality works and, trying to really take in what is tangible and valuable there. Like, what was that experience like for you? Because I think that connects to the rock topic in regards to, people want to be safe. People want to understand what's going on and then expand out from there. And these are things that if you deal with them in a particularly, constructive way, an applicable way, you can be like, oh, okay, so maybe if this does seem legitimate based on this variable, and that variable all connecting together, plus my personal experience, then I can really have more peace, more certainty in what I'm doing and why it makes sense in the grand scheme of things. You know, I want to connect people to the grand scheme of things. So I'm just curious if you have any comments or story relative to that experience that may have helped you or may not have helped you connect your current goals and whatnot to the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, we were talking about mind, body, and soul, and I told that keeps popping in my head over and over is mind, body, soul. Are you looking for truth on the inside or are you looking on the outside? You know, and you think, okay, well, why is the alien green? Well, it's market capitalization, you know, like, or the movies were made like that way. And now, you know, it's just turned into this thing. It's like Santa Claus, you know, like where did Santa Claus come from? You know, all of that. We're not going to get into that.
I don't
topic,
like Santa Claus either.
but that's just it, you know. Before sitting down with someone like Robert Potter, you know, for me, I look at, hey, well, there are so many things out there, you know, now it's like misinformation everywhere, or disinformation is what they say, right? And I listened to him talk and I go, wow, like, you know, there's having passion, but then there's like having conviction, you know? So, I think, you know, they even say the one that has most conviction is the one that kind of leads the conversation. Well, to me, I think that's interesting to kind of experience someone that's been part of this, industry, or not even say industry, but world, I guess.
Field of study.
This truth, I guess.
Truth seeking field of study.
Yeah, I want to stay objective in my mind. I also like, I seek truth on the inside and on the outside. So I like a balance between like, okay, like, is everything else like really bothering? Like, is it affecting my existence? Oh, I can't even say the word existentialism. You know, like if it's helping me grow, then that's great. Like, is it something, like I treat a lot of the stuff that I've gone through in my life is like, is it coming from a place of pain or fear, or is it coming from a place of love and care? You know? And I think that's the difference when I'm hearing something that's maybe going to influence me to think, or maybe to challenge the rocks. You know, is it going to crack my foundation if I find out that something that I've believed all my life is a lie?
And isn't that an interesting part, right? Yeah. Because for something as big as extraterrestrials who have UFOs, that could like really shatter people's confidence in how much power they have or certainty of how things go. Like, if that's true, what does that mean about other things? Or, you know, whatever, right? Like, if we never thought that this was even a part of reality, possibly, and it was all just a part of the science fiction, but then it turns out that E.T. the movie was a movie produced by Steven Spielberg, and he happened to have access to those types of files or connections. And then he based that movie upon UFOs that crashed and an alien, supposedly, this is a true story, or this is something that you can look up. I don't know what the case is called or whatever, but supposedly for E.T., that whole movie was based upon Steven Spielberg having extra access to information where these UFOs were shot down by the military. One extraterrestrial survived that looked somewhat like E.T. in the movie, and they had him contained and communicated with him or studied him or whatever. So there's some theories about him having extra knowledge relative to that. But my point is that media is influenced by people who have power, and people who have power would be the people who would be in the know with these types of things if they were going on. And culture is inevitably going to be swayed to the direction that the people with power want, what narrative they would like it to have. And so if you connect things such as, I don't know, like Star Wars or, you know, Star Trek information or any other type of major media, like, you know, so many different examples, then that could be a way to program a mind to think, oh, okay, so this thing exists in this particular way, but then they sway it one way or the other. So, you know, what happens if it just is that is also going on in a particular section of media? You know, some of these things are legitimate. Like, that's something that I feel people deserve to know about. And it's touchy for if that was to happen or that was to be the case, what is the best way to do that without shattering people's entire perceptions of who they are or what the universe is, you know? Because we're talking about how do you still build a strong foundation for yourself, your mind, body, spirit. How do you build a strong foundation with your close ones and go after your goals and become the best version of yourself when some of those, you know, that foundational concrete has been snapped, you know, like if that was to happen. So Yeah, it's a really powerful subject, and I'm it's just very fascinating to learn more about those things and take it in a serious way, because I think that it would be irresponsible to laugh at it if there is enough evidence for it to be, questioned by Donald Trump, or even, you know, Donald Trump saying that he's in favor of it on certain podcasts, like thinking that there definitely is things he's not being told, such as on Logan Paul's podcast that happened recently, for instance, just one small instance. So that's why I'm really passionate about that. And I think that it connects to The Rock, because these types of fundamental things are important. There's things like meditation headbands that read your brainwaves to help you understand how you're thinking, and get better at doing exactly what your brain needs you to do, what you want your brain to do on command. There's things like sound frequencies that supposedly help certain body areas of your body heal, or at the very least, the placebo effect is clicking in and your energy is going to that area of your body because you believe it to be so. There's so many other different ways that you can heal yourself utilizing techniques that can get your mind, body, spirit, and all the other areas of your life to a better place. And I really love utilizing those.
I think it's important to reflect on, like, let's say aliens were here this whole time, right? Like you said, and they've been around, like they've been in contact and things have been around. What is the real difference in life? Is it like, because like he was saying, because I talked about internal truth and external truth. And we talked about external truth because it's like, okay, seeing it and how what does it look like in our association and all that. But on the internal side, he said that in that community that they are actually providing messages to make a better reflection on what kind of human beings we're being, like in the way that we're acting towards each other and the wars that we're doing, all of that stuff, right? And I think if you look at what the messages were really representing, it was representing love and of course peace and growth, right? And that's where those frequencies come from. Like some of the most powerful frequencies come from love, and he talked about God as well and how everything is interconnected. And I think it's important to factor in like the self-development convention that we just came from. You've got 30,000 people that are all chasing to make a difference in somebody else's life. The company is based upon flipping the model inside out of any work model, because it's, instead of saying what someone should think like, it's like giving a full canvas of be yourself and spread the good message of love and care and utilize all the different tools to be able to empower others, whereas I feel like the world's been on this opposite spectrum where it's like, oh no, like you're not allowed to do that. It's going to be a little bit more money. So sorry, you don't qualify. And it's just like we disqualify so much that we become disqualifiers as a profession nowadays, where it's like when we look at something, we look at are we worth having, or is it worth anything? And all of that aspect, right? So I think that same mentality is being applied towards aliens in the abyss of not knowing, because it's like, oh, well, I think that it's this. I think it's that. No, I believe that. Well, really, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what we believe in. It believes how we feel and how we're actually acting together, right? So, mind, body, and soul, I think that like, what we do in our business, for example, is like we look within, we find our inner truth and like some of the truths that are hard to digest. But once we get to that point, we're able to realize that, once you are able to give to or to fulfill and fill your own cup, you should naturally want to fill others, right? You become more of what you are when you have more money or you have more resource, right? So if you're a bad person, you just become more bad. And if you're a good person, you become more good.
Totally.
And I think as a collective, it's incredible to see, like, I heard it in his message. It was like, they want us all to come together, or like to stop fighting, or like just the overall consensus of to heal yourself from within. Right. And I think that, I don't know why I'd be worried about that or scared about that. Like, I think it's more on the politics side. I think there's fear mongering out there, and that's what is reflected. But I think most people nowadays probably be like, bring it. Like, what else is like, what else can you surprise us with? And if the message that's coming from like some of these community leaders of the spiritual realm and of this higher, or these different dimensions and stuff they talked about definitely blew my mind of like, I don't know. It's not in a belief thing. I think it's more of an understanding.
Yeah.
And I think that also brings another point. If I don't understand it, how am I going to treat it? Right.
Totally.
So,
And I think that's a really great thing for connecting what we do in our business as well too with these types of topics. Like everybody wants to be able or needs to be able to a certain extent to make more extra income. Our business is the opportunity to take on aspiring entrepreneurs or even just people who are looking to be able to live to a higher level of fulfillment, to be able to be more of who they are as an individual, but also to be able to live with more freedom, to be able to not have to worry about these other things in life and have that control, because that control is exactly the same thing as the truth thing. It's filling up these fundamental rock areas with energy, with all of the necessary sustenance to be able to live your life on purpose with intention and fully max out, being able to have the resources and understand how business works and to connect yourself with more people who are dedicated to becoming the better versions of themselves and other people who you already know, being able to provide value with them, like we do, helping people with concepts and strategies with wealth building and all of that side of things. It's such an amazing opportunity to help them with that truth, help them with the truth of understanding how to become the better version of themselves in a tangible way where they can be part of a tangible community, physical and or online, and with a tangible benefit, which is income and advice, which leads to direct actions, So as much as I love all of this stuff, this super out of reach stuff that only the really ballsy are really talking about at this particular moment, I also love the really tangible. And it relates both sides of it. I like looking at the tangible, the business stuff in a spiritual way, and I also love looking at those esoteric things in a really analytical, grounded way. Because I want to learn how to become the best version of myself so that I can help other people become the best versions of themselves. Because what is life for? I think that you get the most fulfillment out of helping other people. And so being able to fill your cup is filling other people's cup, being able to build your rock, your fulcrum, your groundedness, being able to add value to more types of people in a stronger, more applicable way is building everybody else's rock because you're playing an important component. Some people don't even have parents or parental figures. I know some personally who have like none and they've just had to find this person or that person to take them on or try to get them under their wing and they've figured it out, right? But you can be that for people. You can be that for people by having a business like ours or by making pieces of media like this, there might be someone watching who's never had someone to safely talk about these types of taboo topics or could be really going through something tough, crying in their bed in the fetal position, watching this and just being like, damn, they're so right. Like I really needed this or that. I really needed to see it from that wider perspective. And, I don't remember exactly what the original point was there, but I think I made a few good points in the sense of, just how important this stuff is, how important it is to really look at all different forms of things in a serious way and also really value the additional tangible things, the really logical things, and help them both grow yourself holistically, right?
Absolutely. I think this has been such a great topic because there's been a lot of reflection this week, I think, about what difference we can make on other people's lives just based on this company alone, right? And I think that in hindsight of our conversation, I'm sitting there going like, having a proper rock or mountain to stand on, right? To see where you are or where your resources might be. But not only that, to tap into some resources that you may have never been subject to, right? Like the power of collectiveness and how that rock is definitely more than just the rock, and if you let it be more than that rock, then you might explore different parts of you didn't know that you had. And we talked about earlier as well, how to kind of deal with stuff, the rocks and role models, maybe we should call these, right? Because, Yeah, the role model part of like,
Mm.
you kind of hear something you've never heard of before. You experience something you've never heard of before. It's kind of scary or it's exciting. How do you process that, right? Like, do you have something that you compare it to, or like, how do you know for sure that it's true, right? How do you regulate? And it's true. You need to have a good system or support, or like, a good group of people that you can bounce your ideas off. And we've bounced so many ideas off each other, in hindsight. The rock analogy is important to underline in business, as well as being a safe space, like you said, to talk about things.
Mm.
And that is what is missing, I think, sometimes in the world. I think where you're not able to voice your opinion. And if you do, you almost have to have guns ready to like defend yourself
Mm.
with your opinion, right?
Mm.
So, like, I wonder, when it comes to that, and how your self talk might be, if, like, let's say you've been subject to a certain influence or circle that like might have been toxic or that is toxic, and you're starting to remove yourself, and you're doing some of the most incredible work you could ever do in life, and no one's going to give you that reward or gratification that you did it. But when it comes down to that change, though, and you reflect on like who you've become since then, like that drift can happen easily where you're pulled back to that old identity. But like what can keep you in the know is like making sure that you have people that push you in the right direction, that want your success. Right.
Mm.
And I think that's what I like the most about the business that we're in. Like anybody in that arena, you start in any conversation with one of these individuals, they all have an incredible story. I would
Mm.
say that if you hear about someone that is from World Financial Group, ask them, what's your story, and you'll get such a great conversation, because, it's definitely different when you have someone that knows the power of words, but knows the power of intention, and that's essentially what I'm trying to say as far as the rocks and role model is like, be aware that you actually might be a role model for someone in your environment, and you're helping them transition from a place that they didn't know that they can transition out of. Right. And it's important to share, but to keep an open mind, and the combination of both, things are going to happen. It won't be perfect, but as long as you have a good system to keep things objective, to keep that inner truth and the outer truth, at a good objective, like an objective decision, or a platform that's not biased. Like, I think that's probably, I hesitated because I guess it's tough to get there. You need to have friends that will really tell you what they think, not what you want to hear.
Mm.
So I think that is also another area that probably would be a whole other podcast, is like, how do you analyze someone else? How do you find people that do care, or how do you foster those kind of relationships? Right.
Mm.
But regardless, it's by at least finding out what you like first, like, what do you want? What are your rocks? Are they fundamentally stable? And if you don't have them, or if they're shaky, hey, you've acknowledged them, you start from there and you work your way up, right? And you
Absolutely.
start going from there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that was great. And I think that one of the last things that we can touch on, that this whole conversation would be so better complemented to have versus not, would be relationships, like actual relationships with a girl, right? Or a guy for girls, right? Like having a romantic relationship and or the, connections you have with friends can be so detrimental to everything as well too. But particularly having someone who is there that you can revert back to and have a good relationship with for, your ultimate best growth. Like, for instance, I just interviewed somebody while we were in Las Vegas at a pool party, which was a person who is super awesome, very big business in our agency, and has an amazing relationship with her boyfriend that I admire. And I asked her a few questions about what her perspective is on, how the power dynamic works for her and how she sees her relationship and why it works to the caliber that me as an outsider, not knowing her well, I feel like it seems to work well. And I feel like they're both always at ease when I see them with each other. And it doesn't necessarily mean I see everything, but on the outside looking in, it seems very nice. And on the inside being explained, it seems like she comes out of a place of abundance and love and appreciation. And so talking to her about her rock of her boyfriend and his rock of her, I feel like they are able to help each other a lot in regards to, you know, making sure that they're working as a team no matter what they're doing and fulfilling the role that makes sense for that scenario. Not necessarily what they should be doing or what's conventionally normal, but it's helping them both just be maximally passionate and maximally themselves in every stage of their life. She talked about how she has a big business and so she is the primary income earner, but he does a lot of things to make her feel comfortable, to make her feel taken care of and protected. You know, he's super jacked, but he also is super caring and, you know, cooks or plans the trips or does all of those types of things, perhaps to some seen as more of a feminine roles. But for their dynamic, what matters from that whole dynamic? It's being taken care of, right? Being appreciated, being seen, having your emotions complemented by other people's emotions that's constructive for you, and fulfilling the gap areas that your brain isn't naturally good to do. Like, then that converts to friends as well too. Like, my brain is not good at doing a lot of things that your brain is good at doing. I'm not a good driver. I'm not good at following maps. I'm not good at putting suction cups for camera shots on window shields. There's a lot of things that I'm not very good at doing. And so same thing for friends, right? There's a lot of areas where you compliment me and many of my other friends compliment me or I compliment them. And that's what makes it harmonious. And that's what contributes to you being a rock for me and for her boyfriend being a rock for her. And it's always different, but it always is based upon that, is just how are you helping that other person be more whole, be more of an individual, be more fulfilled, and be able to be more expansive with their days going forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have any comments on that?
Absolutely. I love that you brought that in because relationships can be tough. And I think I'll start by saying, like, what's your relationship with yourself? You know, like I realized that in my relationships, most recent one, it was really about that. Like, what's your relationship with yourself? Because, you know, someone as powerful of a woman as Sierra, she has a real identity and she knows what she wants, you know, and she knows what she can provide, you know, and I think that is a strong point to be at that point in your life. You've done a lot of work on yourself. You've done a lot of work. You've experienced life. You know, you've done a lot of things right, but you've done a lot of things wrong, I'm sure, because we fail forward, right?
Yeah.
And that's just it. You know, in my life, I failed forward, but I realized in my last failing forward that I left myself out of the equation, right? And so, making sure that you understand your own expectations, you know, like I think that's where it starts because, like, you know, I heard the interview and just the way that she described about how they complement each other's, either that it's the schedule or that it is just their interactions and how they can be there in a small way. Like those expectations, let's say, that we have of our significant other can really put things in a direction that doesn't necessarily serve. I personally think, because I think, yes, if you communicate that expectation, that's one thing and you're on the same page. But if you don't, it can really put a resentment towards that person if they didn't act that way or they didn't meet the expectation, right? But if they didn't know, then this becomes a cycle that is obvious at this point, not a very good one. But yeah, like what I wanted to add to what you're saying.
Could you put the glasses on your head and then we'll get some last bit of it. Eye contact. We're exposing our eyes here.
That's a perfect segue actually with relationships is being intentional.
Eye to eye. See you.
Yes. But being intentional, like you can tell that when, you know, a woman like Sierra that knows what she brings to the table and that it is not even as conventional as to the norm, you know, like she's actually a breadwinner. Like, my goodness, like to a lot of men that could be very threatening, you know, but the fact that it's not at all. And like the way that you can see so much strength in a relationship when you just use the strengths that you have or the weaknesses and you turn them into like, you know, like a bulletproof.
Yeah, areas to be complemented. Yeah.
Because nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
But when you become intentional, like when we start making eye contact and we go, hey, I'm here and I'm listening. And what is it that you're trying to communicate to me? Or what is it that you want me to feel? Like what I was told recently as well is like, and I loved the concept of like, it's true. Like, hey, who do you want me to be right now? Do you want me to someone that, do you need advice or do you need an ear? You know, someone to just listen. And like that alone, like you think you're going through so many things, even like that it comes to a relationship, like a romantic relationship where it's friends or so on, like with ourselves, do we acknowledge that there's an emotion that's it's affecting us and dealt with it properly. If it hasn't been dealt with properly, like, what's the intention behind that? You know, like, I feel like we can get lost in like, oh, this didn't happen or this was sad or whatever. But if you think about the intention, you know, I go, that, that was not their intention. You know, like they may have said that, but you know what? They show otherwise. Their actions are congruent with them being friends with me. Right.
Yeah.
And if I don't get caught up in that emotional moment and I just in retrospect go, oh, you know what? I'm going to talk to that person and say, hey, that actually made me feel like that. And just be honest, right? I think that goes further, but a lot of people don't think it does. I think they think, oh, well, this is speculation clearly at this point, but I thought like that before as well. Like, I was like, oh, well, I assumed the worst, so I didn't approach that person, or I didn't see a comment, and it could have been a good comment, or it could have been a truth that he needed to, that they needed to hear. But regardless, if I didn't approach, there was no contact, no connection, and the assumption, you know, could be right or wrong. Who knows? But that's just it. Like, I think relationships, it's like if you stay in your head, then you're only going to manifest the things that you're thinking, right? You are the results of your strongest thoughts, or, you know, where energy goes, energy flows or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like, it's just, I've personally witnessed so many people, you know, that I'm interacting with as well. Like, I'm looking to connect with so many people and just empower them and give them options. Right. And I noticed that a lot of the times that self-love that we all like should be having more is kind of missing in a lot of areas, you know, and it's because we've been driven, you know, people have gone through so much in the last how many years with the pandemic and all of the work shifts. I'm sure people are doing different jobs than they were doing before, or working more or less, or there's dynamics that have changed, and you either pivot or not, you know. And I think it's brought people closer. It's separated a lot of people. But I think the biggest part to relationship and connection and the things that we're looking for to be the rocks for others, it's all centered around love, right? And if we can just love ourselves more, forgive ourselves, have better self-talk, then we're at a better place to begin with. When you see somebody else that's going through pain and suffering,
Yeah.
or they're just bored and they're too serious, they've kind of been like down and out, depressed, you know,
Yeah.
I've gone through it and I'm still like dealing with so many things like everybody else. But those elements of like learning when it's time to laugh, you know, it's time to let go of everything that you've just tried to figure out, or that you're just trying to change, and laugh. You're scared of something. You know, what do you do when you're scared? You have pain. You laugh. It's the only real remedy, right?
Yeah. It makes things a lot easier to go through if you can laugh through them, like a lot easier. Like, have you ever, like, what comes to my mind is like being on a run and being so goddamn exhausted, and then just like laughing about how crazy that is, like about how crazy it is, like where you're at right then and there, you know, or, you know, whatever it is, even like boxing for me, these are all physical examples here, but like boxing, like visualizing something while you're boxing because of how primal fighting is such a powerful thing in my experience. And I'm not super into boxing, but even just beating the bag, like if you're imagining something that's like pisses you off, you know, or whatever it would be, and you're releasing that energy, you can hit way faster and you can put way more energy and you can go for way longer if you're just like, you're just thinking about this thing that really pisses you off and you're just going like crazy and you're not even getting exhausted because of like laughter. You're just like, you know, like you're just in this zone. And it's the same thing with like business. Like we have lots of examples of, you know, working with clients or mistakes happening or whatever it would be, or dealing with like your family or your friends or loved ones or whatever, where they do something that's kind of obnoxious or you don't like or whatever. But you can always deal with these situations with laughter, with playfulness, with creativity, with, you know, ingenuity, adaptability. And that's stuff that's never taught and lesser appreciated than these more tangible things. Again, the tangibles and the things that are, you know, good to have or recognized, but more like intuitive. And it makes all the world of the difference.
So true. And there's so much energy that comes from it. Like it's so funny how like you can just see like, okay, learn a song, sing a song, right? Maybe not like heavy metal, but
Yeah.
like sing a song, learn a song. And like when you start singing, like there's emotions in the song, right? So like you have to like mimic them, I guess.
Yeah.
So, but if you start laughing, you know, or you do like sing a happy song and you're not happy,
Yeah.
By the end of the song, I bet you'll be in a different mood.
It's
You
a
know,
spell.
If you let it in. Like
it's a spell.
yeah.
Your thoughts are going to follow.
infectious.
Yeah. Your thoughts are going to follow whatever's in your environment. Music is a great example of that for sure.
Yeah. But, music, like out of all things, I personally love as a universal language too.
Mm.
Like I bet you that like the universe itself, like probably has archived lots of the music for the centuries the universe to hear, because that's probably the one thing humans have created that have brought positive.
What do you mean by that? It's archived the music?
Oh yeah, of course.
It's got like a terabyte hard drive somewhere, like a 1 trillion terabyte hard drive, infinite. You think
100%.
God's got an infinite hard drive?
He's got the best final collection you can get.
Unlimited data on the Akashic records.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally feel that. When I think about how music connects to the rock, how it connects to all areas of your life, it's just about enjoying your every action and figuring out how to get into that logical, mathematical goal, pursuit mindset, builder mindset, helping humanity mindset, while also just really enjoying yourself,
Yeah.
while finding that flow state where there's enough thing to be pursuing. There's enough of a challenge. You're pushing yourself, but you're also, there's enough of this wiggle room where you're able to incorporate those types of creative things, those fun things, where when you see people killing it, or you see people you admire who are celebrities or whatever it may be, really big in their field, they usually got some sort of a flair to them or something like that, because they've embraced both sides of that. Like when I was younger, I sung all the time, and everyone always like, why do you do that all the time? Like, we'll listen to the music, And then I was like, oh, well, I kind of like doing that, And now I sing all the time when I'm just like doing this or that, or, having conversations in and of itself is very rejuvenating to me, particularly as a person. And there's going to be lots of other types of creative things that other people are really excited by and fuels them up and makes it all worth it, Figuring out as kind of a closing thing, like how to make it all worth it. Like, when you're smiling, the whole world smiles with you. I like doing that shit.
That's awesome.
I like doing that shit.
I feel like you had like a past life as a singer and like on a cruise or something, or like
dude,
in a lounge.
No, I was the dude with the white striped shirts rowing those boats in Italy.
Oh
yeah, dude.
Cool. Yeah, actually, we've seen one of those in Vegas. That was awesome.
Yeah,
it's crazy how like they recreated so many different moments in that strip, and you can kind of get a taste of everything in a night. Like, it's pretty cool. I think like that kind of sparks in me as well as like, because in a theme of like things that you do for yourself to kind of like fill your cup, and it's just like doing like mini events or like little things that like kind of just spark that.
Yeah.
That
they're so important.
Passion, that energy, like, and that's just it. Like when we went out for this walk that one night and we just did that, like, taking pictures of everything and like in those mementos, you look back at those pictures and be like, wow, like that was such an incredible time. And like it energizes you. And like, I get that whole memento, what it means now, like it's important to have these.
Yeah.
Like I in the past, I lost a lot of my stuff in a move and I was so upset with it. And I think from that moment on, I became non-materialistic whatsoever. But I realized that it's not necessarily the object, but it's your perspective of what that object represents for you. Right?
Yeah, security.
And that you can burn that image in your head, right? Yeah. Or songs.
In closing, like if there was one thing that I think is more important than anything else for people to tangibly get a benefit out of having listened to this and got to this point, I would say that making sure that no matter what you do, you're incorporating some sort of thing that fills your soul with joy.
Yeah.
Will fundamentally build your rocks, build your foundation, build your mind, body, spirit, self-develop in those areas and be a more lovable or more caring or more whatever it would be person around those people who are able to be perhaps your closer rocks, people you can trust and
if
appreciate.
You don't have it, find it.
Yeah, absolutely. And utilize the things you're passionate about to add value to those people. Like a great example of this is I'm very passionate about technology and recording dope ass conversations and all this stuff, or like, wearing cool stuff and whatever. It's like, it's just kind of fun, it's like a cool experience, right? Yeah. And like, this adds another element. What we're recording right now, is something that you could do. It's something that you could do with your friends. You don't even have to post this necessarily, or you could just use a little, photo of it or whatever you wanted to do. You don't even have to necessarily record it, but it kind of holds you accountable to have like a good conversation at the very least. But you could do things like that. Whatever particular thing it is to you that makes it more enjoyable. I have rose water in this thing. It's kind of funny. It's kind of unique to me, but I like it because I like.
Maybe I'll take some now.
You want some?
Yeah.
How does that smell?
I thought you were going to give me one squirt.
I just waterboarded you with roses.
I'd be waterboarded in roses.
If I was like a Pokemon, that's my attack. It's rose water.
Should I warn anybody else that's going to be on a podcast?
Loverboy used rose water. Crash Gunner used rose water.
Well, I mean, maybe they'll be clearer and my face will be rejuvenated from it.
Yeah, there's definitely some benefits. I don't
It's
remember
actually
what they are.
refreshing with all the heat we had.
Yeah, but yeah, I think that was it. Thanks for hanging out, bro.
Right.
That was fucking awesome.
Yeah, man, it was great. The rocks are now going to bed too, so
Yeah. All right. We can wrap up. We're going to go to bed with the environment. Good night, ladies and gentlemen.